Taylor. So I put to the council that we continue with the meeting after 8 hours. All those in favour? Those against? All right, motion carried. We are back in the open. So we will go back to, I believe we're talking about ferries.
Yes.
Okay, so Nick, you'll be getting a tired voice. Nick is the General Manager of Infrastructure, and we've got Mike's Seaboard. Yeah, sorry, Head of Transport. And they'll just speak to the report. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And you've already heard Amy and Peter talk about this earlier in the public forum. So this is a proposal for a service between City Centre and Mount Maunganui. We were approached by Hauraki Express, who runs similar services in Auckland. And the proposal is that they develop their services and carry CapEx costs and operational costs, but with us and Regional Council each underwrite operational costs of about 700k per year for 2 years, so 1.4 million. I just wanted to emphasize too that this is a trial only, and that we at the end of the trial would have gathered enough data and seen the uptake of it to take it to the market. And of course, this isn't a final conclusion of this. They, Hauraki Express, they still have work to do their side. They need confirmation from us that we will underwrite those operational costs that they won't recover through the fare box in order for them to conclude their negotiation with banks, etc. So we would come back here after the next step, which would be to negotiate conditions and commercial arrangements of that contract. So it's not the last time you see it here, but for the purpose of them being able to carry on, they need to know whether we would approve to underwrite those operational costs. And Regional Council is looking to make the same decision. They had it up for consideration at their last council meeting a week and a half ago or something like that, or 2 weeks ago. And they said that they wanted TCC to reconfirm the underwriting of those operational costs under the elected members. So hence we're here asking for that to happen. And it's not like the Regional Council's decision at their last meeting was not conditional on or conditional of your underwrite, but they once you have agreed or otherwise, they will then consider it. So that's the current situation.
Thank you. So just a very brief bit of background. This obviously came back and was asked whether I was prepared to sign this on behalf of council, but obviously we have an opportunity to debate it and bring it out into public. So obviously that transparency is important to this council. So that's why we're bringing it up, and I haven't just signed off and asked Regional Council to just approve it. This is, as we've heard, already approved by the commissioners. And obviously we now have the opportunity to put this to an elected council. So I firstly ask if there's any questions to the staff. Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mayor Mahi. Mr. Johansson, if I can just have it clarified for my own understanding, Regional Council this is their decision that's coming up, is not contingent upon this decision. So if council chose to decline the opportunity, that's not it for them. They may still choose to continue with the opportunity. Is that right?
Yeah, that would be a different resolution though, because then they would be asked to underwrite double the amount that they are at the moment.
Yeah.
Supplementary, where did the proposal for the City Council to fund 50% of the trial come from? Was that something that the Regional Council put to the Council of the day, or was it something that was offered up by the City Council?
That was a product of the joint PT committee, where a couple of regional councillors, together with a couple of commissioners, met at regular intervals and talked about public transport opportunities for Tauranga. The Hauraki Express folk came and presented to the joint PT committee, and that started those conversations about the underwrite and whether this was a partnership or not, and whether it would be of interest to TCC to accommodate any funding for the operational component. But of course, public transport and moving people under public transport, normal circumstances are at the cost of the regional council.
Any other questions for staff? Yeah, Councillor Crowther.
Yeah, now, can you please clarify if it is underwriting it or a subsidy? Because both words have been used and they're quite different.
Well, yeah, so if we were to have a spectacular uptake, it would be a matter of some subsidy, not necessarily the whole sum, but that's why this is set at a maximum that they would need from very high level modelling and I guess assumptions on uptake need as contribution in order to make it go around.
Sorry, that's just for clarification, because it talks about underwrite. So assuming that they were successful and they made money, we would be up for nothing, is that right?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes. If the operational expenditure associated with this isn't included in this number, so this is the full underwrite of the service to put it on, to run it as a trial for 2 years, and that's shared between the Regional Council and Tauranga City Council. Any operational revenue that comes in will be used to offset those costs for both councils. So there's an assumption that it would be almost free. Not that it will be, people will be charged fares, but that revenue will go then against offsetting the total cost to both councils.
It is an underwrite, not a subsidy.
My understanding was that $6 a day is in one of the business cases I read. $6 per trip.
Through you, Mr. Chair, correct. So the intention is to charge for fares, but and as part of a previous role, we wanted to make sure we presented the full cost risk to both councils of that providing that service for 2 years. And so any revenue gathered from that $6 will be then collected by councils and then used to offset the total cost for councils. So we are as a group of staff presenting that to council as the full total cost that may come in if nobody used the service. As soon as people start using it, the revenue will offset that total cost.
And so then if it was over the 1.4 million a year, that's on Hauraki Express. Yeah. Paul, did you have?
Oh no, just clarity. Understand it's the maximum that we're not passenger that we could pay.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Crowther.
Given that, what you just said, Mike, how many passengers do we need per day, year, or whatever, in order to not pay any subsidy?
I think there's some furious calculating going on over this corner over here. But from a more principles and less numbers perspective, it needs to be near full or close to full constantly. So there is a risk, and this is one of the reasons both staff sought to make sure both councils were aware of the full cost. And this is a trial to test that demand. And so what would it cost councils to run the service and have that demand risk tested? And that's the purpose of the trial, is that you will understand very acutely how much people are prepared to pay, how much people are prepared to use it as an option, as a trial service. And the purpose of it being pitched as a trial is to really ascertain that demand. Now, the rationale around that is it's very difficult to forecast that. This is a relatively new type of service, and with a particular regard to passenger transport service. The regional council is unable to fund this through the Waka Kotahi, and so they also would need to prove, if they were to use this as a PT service going forward, that it had enough demand to wash its face, if you like. And so this is one of the reasons why it's been pitched as a trial from staff.
My very quick calculation was 60% occupancy to cover the costs of $1.4 million a year. So 18 passengers per trip. Yeah, for 40. So there's 40 trips a day, 20 on each boat. 40? Yeah. There's 330 days that they're going to operate. And so you need 18 passengers per trip to make the 1.4. So any other questions? Yes.
And I apologise because I can't access the key documents from. I'm councillor excluded as well as public excluded on this, unfortunately. But so thank you, Mayor Drysdale. But I'm just interested in why, after seeing the sequence of business cases or feasibility studies and various things that have happened over the past half decade or more in terms of ferry services, and the prices, I know, dropped down massively. So this is by far the cheapest option, and so the most scalable, and certainly well worth consideration. But I'm just trying to understand why NZTO Waka Kotahi have not come to the party and said this has a public transport component and therefore we will look at co-funding it. It just seems the normal process all the way through until the commissioners gave their approval was that anything to do with the delivery of public transport services would be, as you know, the regional council funding issue. And I'm just, is it a public transport option, or is it really just a tourism ferry, and therefore that's why it's not being co-funded that way?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the conversations that took place at the joint PTC meeting asked that very question. And so they were concerned that if our partner, who are usually our funding partner with regard to PT, wasn't interested, why would this continue as a proposal? And partially it's to do with the fact that those forecastings as described were difficult to really ascertain. The other element to this is, and it's noted in the paper, that improving the bus service between the Mount and Tauranga is, from a passenger transport purist perspective, probably the most cost-effective way of responding to this demand. So that's acknowledged. The paper then went through a discussion piece within the joint PTC, and I think they saw value in that combined proposal of accessing a tourist market as well as responding to a PT need. And I think that was a process by which they came to the conclusion of perhaps a trial was needed to understand that demand and whether that is truly a tourism type of a proposal or truly a PT type of proposal. I think it became an on-balance decision at the time. One thing staff could not offer was that data to support that forecast or not, and hence why a trial was proposed to understand the situation more readily. The contextual element there too is construction on the network, as we've heard today, is one of those elements where it can easily congest a network and and suddenly make a proposal like this very attractive. And I think in the context of that wider construction, this proposal became more of a viable option, and it was able to be pitched as a trial, and hence why we're here today to reconfirm that or to see what the decision may be.
Councillor Taylor.
In the case study there, it's talking about 330 days a year. Is that what happens to the other days of the year? Will they not operate for winter or something?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the operational detail we haven't worked out, and I think those are the types of details we have to get to before it becomes the next stage of the decision. As Nick alluded to earlier, if there's truly something that the council would like to progress, we need a bit of direction from council to take it to the next stage, and I think it's really important that we are clear with the commercial supplier there, one way or the other, before we get into the operational context, and we can start to work through those operational issues.
There were assumptions about inclement weather and other days during which the service wouldn't run. So I think that's based on their experience. And well, I don't think that when they put the business case together, they used the data from previous services, and they know that they can't run every day of the year because of those things.
All right, thank you very much for your time and answering those questions. I would now like to call for a mover and seconder of the motion ahead of us, or an alternative motion. If we just place that up on the screen. I got a mover for that. Councillor Taylor will move it, and Deputy Mayor Schooler will second it. Would you like to talk, Councillor Taylor?
Just briefly, I think it wasn't very clear that it was actually the $6 was actually going to reduce this amount, and I think that's made quite a big difference to the cost to the people, I think. So, yeah, I'll see it in a different light after knowing that.
Thank you. Councillors Reserve. Anyone else like to talk to this proposal? Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mayor Mahi. Yeah, I do support the resolutions as written and moved and seconded. My strong preference would be on the completion of trial, that assuming that it's a successful trial, which one hopes that it is, that full responsibility reverts to the regional council as is appropriate, unless they want to have a wider discussion about buses and the city's responsibility for the bus network, in which case that conversation would be very welcome by myself. But as it is written, I do support it, and the discussion and questions around the fee payable and the maximum amount have helped me with coming to that conclusion today.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. Councillor Curran.
Thank you, Mayor Mahi. I won't support it. I think during the questions, particularly to me, it started to sound like a bit of an airy-fairy, excuse the pun, proposal, largely sounding like a more of a tourist service rather than a true public transport function. I think there's not the benefits in terms of the user experience, in terms of time. It would be, advantage. I think in terms of the experience, and I go back to an experience I had with a ferry from Devonport to CBD Auckland many years ago, probably over 20 years ago. You have this romantic notion that hopping on a ferry, going across the water, when you're on holiday as a tourist, it's quite neat. But when it becomes if it does become a public transport service, that quickly goes. And so I hopped on this ferry thinking, oh, great, hop on board and chat. Everyone was happy and everyone just had their newspaper. This is back before mobile phones like this. And nobody out of those 50 people were talking. It was just glum and gloomy. And I thought, that was interesting. So, looking at this, I think initially there might be some excitement in terms of some people using it for a commuter service. And definitely there'll be demand from gold card users or someone, during the week looking for an experience, going either from Tauranga to the Mount or Mount to Tauranga. But, to me, it just doesn't stack up. We haven't got a solid business case, it's suck it and see, really, is what I'm hearing. And given that there's been no competitive process, I would expect this council to put out a request for a proposal and get some options to look at. So, it won't take cars off the road. So in terms of public transport, so I can't support it.
Thank you. Anyone else, like Councillor Rosenboom?
I've got a few questions. Effectively by underwriting this, we're exposing Tauranga ratepayers to subsidise a business competing against another business we're already paying rates to fund. If it's shoved at the public transport sector, that's the regional council, and they haven't come across as being overly enthusiastic up to this point. They've had 2 goes to get in behind this and they haven't done so, and they're supposed to be the public transport driver in the bay, and they are not overly optimistic about how much of that 700 a year they're going to get back. We're a little bit short of KPIs in relation to at which point are they going to call it quits. So if after 6 months that doesn't even look remotely like breaking even, are they going to push on for the 2 years? I'd like more information around that before I support this. Around if the people buy into it, great, we'll go ahead. If they don't, at which point are they going to decide that this is just not a financially viable option and they're going to pull the pin on it? So at this stage, as it sits here, I can't support it.
Thank you. Councillor Schuler.
I think to recognise the significant contribution from the private equity, the people that are actually going to be operating, putting up considerable amount of money to get 2 ferries and to run the OPEX, and I'm not sure, but I'm expecting the marketing and promotion will be a big part of it as well. So, it may not be perfect. That's part of the reason why it's a trial, and I think we've got someone else that's heavily invested in it and prepared to do this and commit for this for 2 years. So I do support it.
Thank you, Councillor Crowther.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think I'm sort of a bit torn because I love the idea of ferry. I know, my parents grew up with ferries, people before that used ferries, etc. I think my biggest concern is that we seem to have made, a prior decision at this council to back one particular solution ahead of others. And I'm not convinced it's the best solution, particularly Councillor Roseboom's comment in terms of, I see it in their feasibility, they're looking at taking an awful lot of people from single occupancy vehicles. I'm not convinced that's the case, particularly because it's not necessarily a public transport service, but a tourism service. And you could get the same effect you get for cycle trails, which is people drive to a location to take, either a bike somewhere or jump on a ferry, which doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that it puts a different slant on it. And I think for me, I'd like to see what things we really need in the way of public transport and tourism related activities. And I think, from what I understand of the issues, there's a strong demand for on-demand bus services in Welcome Bay, and certainly in Matua, Cherrywood, my neck of the woods, throughout Otamotai. And I think those things are actually give more bang for buck from what I've seen And speaking to regional council, I know there's every chance that they might see it the same way. So, you know, I look at all that, and I particularly look at the fact that we haven't delivered our public transport infrastructure that repeatedly has been promised by mayors and commissioners to Tauranga. We've done some of that, but we are well short of delivering the number of bus shelters in Portamotai and potentially many other areas. We have not delivered a CBD bus interchange. There are other bus interchanges, and I'm really concerned about the financial situation of this council. And until I get some assurance that we can prioritise the core infrastructure around public transport and help regional council to deliver a successful bus service, I struggle to sort of, you know, to do a bit of a, you know, have a bet on this. So I'm not opposed to. I see there's potentially a great time in the future when this will be invaluable, which is when we have Te Manawa open, when we have construction hopefully happening on Hewlett's Totara. That will be a completely different ballgame, but I think then we will need different ferries. And I really want to say finally that I appreciate the Burks for doing a fantastic job and actually refining what was initially a bit of a, how would I put it, flights of fancy that came through in ferry proposals, and they brought it down to something very practical that we can have a view on and seriously consider. My own view is that we should probably punt it a little bit further along until we get a bit more clarity, and I see an optimal time in a couple of years to actually do that.
Thank you. I will speak to it. This is a little bit hard for me. I guess I'm a bit torn as to which way to go. I think on balance, I support this proposal, and I support it because we need to find alternative transport means. And I think this is a start of a conversation. I think the boats have been designed very cleverly, that they have the ability to go to any boat ramp around the harbour, and also ultimately out to Western Bay. So, you know, I think that the proposal in front of us takes a lot of the risk and the cost of a ferry trial out. I'm not sure if we put it out to the public, we would get another proposal that effectively is as cheap as this one is to the council, and taking, you know, some of that risk away from us. My understanding is if we were to run a trial like this, we'd be looking at a minimum of about $4 million ourselves to set this up. So I do see some value there. You know, I think the reason we run this trial is to see whether there is demand and whether it is an effective service. Because if it did take off, even if it was predominantly used by tourists, and that delivered people, you know, direct to Te Manawa and our civic centre, that, you know, is part of, I guess, rejuvenating the city centre. I note that I think in the initial proposal they were looking at starting Easter next year, but obviously with the delays, that is probably now not starting until towards the summer of 25, which will sort of work in, I guess, with the delivery of our first stage of Te Manawa or Te Papa. So I think on balance, I am supportive of this. I think it's worth giving it a try. And, you know, while it is a significant amount of money to this council, I think on balance, it's going to be as good as we're going to get if we ever want to do this. And obviously, if it works and it can be expanded, fantastic. I would want to see the trial start to pay for itself. You know, I don't want to be a ferry operator as a council for the next 20 years. And so I would be looking at a fairly high bar, but on my very brief calculations, each seat is around about $3.53. If assuming they're doing the 20 trips a day each ferry, and they're running 330 days a year. So for that sort of price, obviously, we've discussed it. We need about 18 people per trip to make that work. And I think that can obviously offset that 1.4 million that we're committing to over those 2 years. So that's my thoughts. And any other discussion? Otherwise, we can go back to Rod to sum up if he. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Yeah, go, Councillor Schooler.
Thank you, Mayor Mahi. Oh, sorry. I think it's a bit of a tough time in the evening to be talking about this, and I think we need to look at the photo up here. This is, as they talked about, we are a harbour city. This is Tauranga Harbour, a harbour, what do they call it? The Blue Highway. And I just think this is the chance. We do know we have to change the mode of transport. We can't keep just saying, let's put 25 million, 125 million to make a new lane. We have to start the conversation. I would love right now to go, if I had my bike outside, to zoom down, get on the, you imagine feeling right now with a bit of like 13 minutes of wind in your hair getting back home. Rain's fine, it's covered, but we do need to think differently. This is exactly what we want, isn't it? We've got private investment into the city of Tauranga. We've got private experience. We've got it coming in, willingly come in. Yes, there's a cost to that, but there is always a cost to being a bit bold. But we don't want to just sit and do the same thing. We have to change the way we utilise, we use, we have the opportunity for Tauranga. We want a different Tauranga. We need to be thinking about things in a different way. Yes, it's expensive for the ratepayer, but I think the longer term benefits will prove that it's something we want. And I don't know, when we talk about tourism, is it tourism when a family comes over from the Mount to Manamataki o Te Papa for the weekend? Is it tourism when a resident in Tauranga goes to the Mount by ferry? I don't call that tourism. I call it that what we should be doing and encouraging. From a public transport perspective, it's a fantastic new offering. I really hope it then is able to go to Omokoroa, because I know the people there that I've spoken to say it's wonderful. I disagree with my experience on the last ferry I was going to Waiheke. I had a glass of wine with a couple of people I met on the ferry, and I didn't know how I was going to get to the restaurant. They offered me a ride. So there weren't any newspapers on that ferry. So for me, it's what we need. We do need to think about different ways of public transport. It's great for our health. It's safe. It's a lovely way to be travelling, and I'm strongly supportive, in case you hadn't noticed.
Thank you. I'll go back to Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Jen. You've expressed it much better than I could. A couple of things. I think the difference with this one is we're not paying for the whole thing. We've got someone putting up close to $2 million or more than that to make this happen. They're going to be very incentivized to make that work. So I think we can take it that they're going to push the thing for all it's worth. And if it's ever going to happen, they're probably the guys that will do it. They've tailored the boats to suit our situation, which I think is fantastic. It gives us lots more opportunity up harbour, as you said. And then the other thing, I think I said the other day with the city centre project, the council's already made a decision for these people. They thought they had the thing in the bag. I don't think it's very fair that we pull the rug out from underneath them at this late stage. But yeah, I think it's a great project for Tauranga, and I'm looking forward to seeing it.
All right, thank you very much. This is quite a long motion, so it's up on the screen, and I'll take it as read. And now I'd like to go to a vote. So all those in favour? Those against? Crowther and correct.
Yeah.
Okay, I declare the motion carried. Thank you. Right, now we go to Transport Resolutions Report number 52. We will take the report as read, but Nick Johansson, General Manager Infrastructure, will be speaking to the report, hopefully briefly.
I only come here because there's a functioning microphone. I'm sort of happy to not talk to this at all, but I think you sort of need to know that these are regular papers to keep current any regulatory changes to the network and make them enforceable. And it has to be full council that considers those because it becomes bylaw by which then we can enforce it. So the novelty is likely to wear off of these papers over time, but they're nonetheless important for that process. So here we are, and we've got a bit of a mix of community feedback and issues identified by the road safety team. And this time it's no different. Actually, we have about 50% of the changes have come through CCM, so the sightline difficulties, that sort of thing, or blocked sightlines or traffic lanes, and half of the issues are identified by our own team. So I just wanted to call out the new Devonport Road car park. It's a big step for us to have that completed, and that's one of the changes that's included here. So it's a bit of a fantastic moment to celebrate to have that one sorted as well.
Thank you, Nick.
Questions?
Yeah, just have a question. So can you just explain, some of those sight lines? How does that actually come about? That's a resident coming out their driveway saying, I can't see, they come to council and then you send someone out, is that?
Yeah, that's right. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we'll go ahead with it, because it depends on, sometimes it can be a one-off that there's a particularly large vehicle parked that blocks the sight line. If it's a standard vehicle, then it might not be a regular occurrence, and we decide not to do anything about it. But so there, our road safety engineers go and make an assessment of the situation at hand.
And generally, do they go and knock on any doors or get any feedback or?
Yeah, we do. If there are bigger changes, over bigger distances, etc., then we do go through a process of checking in with neighbours, and often it's not only the one person either that comes with that sort of feedback, but we get a CCM and then we get other emails to follow up because they talk to each other in the neighbourhood. So there's often a trend of those issues that we landed with.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Councillor Currat.
Just on those white lines restricting parking, it seems to be growing rapidly, and to the point where I think there's a level of frustration that people find it difficult to find on-street parking where they need to. So what sort of criteria, and perhaps you could share it with elected members, because sometimes I struggle to see any reasoning behind yellow dotted lines where they actually are, because it seems not to be a safety issue. So is there a document that we can perhaps look at in terms of the criteria used, operational guideline or policy?
Yeah, the big guidelines that we can provide on that, and sometimes it's difficult to understand because one situation seems identical to another situation, and but you have different responses to it. But it's often to do with a volume of traffic that you have on the road or the street. That's a deciding factor as well, whether it's an arterial or depending on the traffic volume.
More of a safety issue, because in case a kid comes out between two parked cars? Is that the main safety concern on a faster road?
Yeah, that would be a concern, but that's, I mean, that could happen anywhere. So I don't think that's necessarily a strong case to change anything. You know, we provide crossings where they need to be. We can't sort of prevent that instance from happening everywhere across the network. So it's generally more that it's the blocked sight lines basically where we do feel the need to introduce them.
Councillor Taylor.
Sorry, just a couple very quick ones. So one of my business owners in town was asking up on Cameron Road, 30-minute parking. How soon after we pass this will they start enforcing it?
That can take immediate effect. The bylaw becomes operational from today, but like anything we enforce, we don't necessarily issue fines in the first instance, and we have warnings and try to communicate and educate before we go to fines. So although the bylaw becomes effective as of today, it doesn't mean that we'll be issuing fines to people.
It's more about moving on. There's some tradies parking, but sorry. The second question was about the bus parking down on Sulphur Point. Have they given a commitment they'll actually use that for lay-by parking?
Yeah, I might have to check with Sean on that, but they actually don't have much much choice in the matter. But I'll ask Sean for the detail on that.
Yes, so the provision of that bus layover parking is based on the current layover parking on Durham Street being at or above capacity. So the idea is that will allow them somewhere a little bit less disruptive to lay over their buses until they develop a proper off-street layover space.
Thank you.
Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mayor. With the exception of Willow Street and the lines that have been there for many years, just wanted to confirm that no road markings or action or signs have been taken before this decision today. And that's just based on previous experience where I've seen council reports come after no stopping lines, for example, have been put in different places.
Yeah, so sometimes we do put it in if there's an immediate need for a change, but that just means that we can't enforce it. So it's will and compliance until we're in a position to enforce it, and sometimes that happens intentionally, and sometimes things fall in a gap, and it's a mistake by us. So there are from time to time we've had to take issues to council where we have find an error in the current bylaw, for instance, that something is not covered by the bylaw. So it's something has been in place for a period of time, and it only becomes enforceable when the bylaw is passed.
Right, Councillor Schooler, Deputy Mayor Schooler, sorry.
Right. A question, what does existing restriction, which is not listed in the bylaw, mean in regard to some parking time restrictions?
Yeah, so that is what we just spoke about. So that's there's an existing restriction which isn't covered in a current bylaw. So it only becomes enforceable.
So you put it in place without coming to this committee, and then we'll see if there's a reaction.
That's right, and that happens from time to time. When we complete a project, for instance, we try to do that ahead of, like, cutting the ribbon, for want of a better term, before it's implemented. But it does happen that sometimes we do have it all in place, and I guess the bus lanes are an example of that. So the bus lanes on Cameron Road.
No, so this is at the Mount where we sort of talk about not having to pay for parking, but this is additional restricted parking, which a decision was made to have restricted parking. I'm just trying to understand what the process goes through.
Hi, everybody. It's Reese again. In the case of those ones in the Mount, and I don't know for exactly certain based on the line that you're dealing with in the report, but we recently engaged with all the businesses on Monganui Road because we were returning to enforcing the time limits. And there was a specific area in the Mount that had time limit signs there for over 10 years, and it had just never been covered in the bylaw. So it was a case where it was only about 10 spaces where the bylaw covered up to like a certain intersection. I won't tell you where it is because everybody will park there otherwise. And there was sort of about a block gap between where it mentioned restrictions. So we're not changing the restrictions that are labelled there. It was just they've been unenforceable for quite a few years.
Dimitri, so if I went to the businesses along these areas and asked them, they'd say, oh, no, that's always been there.
Correct.
Councillor Roseburn.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. Just in relation to 7.1, which is no parking behind the curb, and 7.2, no stopping at any time, except that you've followed a fairly robust process to get to here. By doing this, are we going to move the problem somewhere else? Especially with the no stopping here at any time. They're obviously parked there because they can't park anywhere else. So if we allow them not to park here, are we moving a problem from one spot to another spot somewhere around town?
Yeah, well, there is an element of that, but we try to make a reference then to the parking buildings in the city.
Yeah, I was more referring to the two with the trucks in it actually, because I'm pretty sure one of them's the log trucks at the Mount, that it's not their problem that it's like that. It's a system network breakdown, so to speak.
Sometimes there is a safety aspect as well, where even if we know that we might be moving the issue in some cases, sometimes there's a real safety need to do so.
Fair enough.
Councillor Crowther.
Yeah, I concur with the councillors who've said there's a lot of public interest in this issue, and some of it is coming from a perception or reality, and I have no idea which, that the council is actively trying to put more yellow lines and things to deter people from using cars. Now, some of the evidence for that is presented to us, and there were 3 of us in a meeting the other day, where just one of many examples where people are saying that, in that case, it was a commissioner who stated that quite clearly, and that was relating to the yellow lines in 8th Ave, and I know Edgecombe Road's one that you must have heard a lot about, and I guess from a layperson point of view, a lot of us look at it and kind of go, we didn't see a safety issue. There doesn't seem to be a safety issue. There's a whole lot of space there that's just unutilized, a lot of demand for parking. And I look at, as an example on this list, where I look at Otamotai Road West, and we've got about a dozen houses up to the intersection. And there's a little, I've forgotten the term, the jutty out bit that council puts in to make it easier for pedestrians and harder for cyclists. So there's one of those. But other than that, you're not going to have people utilising that lane that I can see. I'm really struggling to see at any level that argument, and yet I can clearly see what the public is saying to us.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to see that example where you had where 3 of you were informed of an issue, so that we could respond to it appropriately. I don't know the one that you're talking about, but there's certainly no intention or instruction that we are following where we're introducing lines for the sake of mode shift or people not taking their cars. They are driven by a logic of some reason and generally safety or feedback through CCMs. So it's not like we come up with these out of thin air. So I'd be really interested to find out about that particular case so that we can respond to it appropriately.
I think we'll be bringing that initially to you as staff, and then potentially we'll have a discussion amongst elected members as well. But I guess the other thing, if we do have specific concerns about anything on this list, are we able to, is it best to just liaise with you around that? Because there will be, I'm sure, this particular example is in Councillor Schuller's ward, but I'm sure that, you know, it will get some public feedback, I would imagine.
We're very happy to take that feedback, and we'll deal with them each as they come in. Thank you.
Right, we'll keep moving on, but Councillor Currat can have a last say.
So further to that, in residential areas where the demand for on-street parking is growing because not only intensification via more intensive housing developments, but also the number of people living in dwellings. Like you can get a 4 or 5 bedroom house where every person in that house has got a car. And so we're finding that particularly, I think, in Jen's ward. But just generally, do you take that into account when looking at, do we put yellow lines there? Because without that on-street parking, it makes it extremely difficult for a lot of people to find a park.
We take that into consideration, but ultimately, that the first call is around safety. So it's a safety-driven decision, and even if there is, even if there were higher intensification and a higher demand, we would look to implement the safe option rather than looking after parked vehicles or boat trailers.
What Glenn was saying before, maybe we need to take into account these issues as elected members, because it's a call. You make a call at the end of the day. Okay, safety versus practicality, basically, and the importance of providing parking, because otherwise, where do people live?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Currat, and thank you, staff, for answering our questions. I now move to the resolution we have in front of us. And is there someone prepared to move that motion? Councillor Taylor will move that, and seconded Councillor Rosaboom. I would now open the floor for debate, and if there's any debate or questions, statements. Okay, Councillor Crowther.
I'll make a positive one, which is it's good to see more mobility parking spaces, and I'd encourage more of that.
Any further debate? If that's the case, I will move to the motion. I will take it as read, as it hasn't changed, and it's quite a simple one. All those in favour? Aye. Those against? So one against. And I declare the motion carried. Now we move on to elected members' pecuniary interest register and appointment of the registrar. Again, we will take this as read, and I'll open it up to Coral for any questions that people may have around this. Okay.
Happy to move.
Okay, we've got no questions. We'll move on, and we've got Councillor Currat to move. We've got a seconder, Councillor Morris. Anyone wish to speak to the motion? Okay, then therefore I put the motion that we receive the report for elected members' pecuniary interest register and appointment of registrar, delegates to the Chief Executive the decision to appoint the registrar to compile and maintain the Tauranga City Council's elected member pecuniary interest register. Notes that update provisions relating to the pecuniary interest register will be included in the draft code of conduct for elected members, which will be considered at a later council meeting. I now ask for all those in favour. Those against? Okay, motion carried. We now will go back into the publicly excluded session. Are we covered?
Yeah, we've just got attachments that are all good.
Oh, yeah. Well, that, we don't need to do that, which is fantastic. So now we will move to close the meeting, and I ask Councillor Baker, please, for a closing karakia.
We'll do a long one. Nah. Kia tāre watunga ki te kōrero ki te rangi koe tēnei te whakawātea ki nei tūturu whakamaua kia tīna haumie hui e tai ki e.
All right, well, I thank you very much, everyone, for your attention and of a very long meeting. But I now declare the meeting closed at 5:54 p.m. Thank you very much.